The Major Spoilers podcast covers news, reviews, and of course, spoilers, and goes into details about the topics discussed. So if you haven't read, listened, or watched the items we talk about, you might want to come back later.
I'm Rodrigo.
And I'm Steven, and you're listening to the Major Spoilers podcast, the podcast for pop culture and comic fans. Welcome to issue 1082 of the Major Spoilers podcast. This week on the show, Absolute Power number 1, Suicide Squad, and Don't Spit in the Wind. More on that a little bit later. Rodrigo, have you had a chance to check out the new Hellboy the Crooked Man trailer?
I did, yeah. I saw it.
What are your initial thoughts and reactions to it?
I like it a lot.
Me too. There's something about it that I'm like, I know if I say A24, people are going to say, well, this is more of a Blumhouse film than an A24 film. I'm like, but it's still got that independent horror vibe going for it. And I dig that.
Yeah. So I think that the Guillermo del Toro Hellboys were really good. I like them. But there's like Guillermo del Toro-ness to it. And that's... It's like I don't think it's like, I'm not saying this negatively, but there's a like a workshopped, like a thoroughly done aspect to them. It's like you can tell that the image is filtered. You can see that the sets are like really lavish. And I think I forgot who directed it, but I think that like David Harbour Hellboy fell short because it was still trying to do that, and not trying to do its own thing. But this one feels like it's doing its own thing, and it doesn't feel that way. It feels raw. It feels natural, in a way that, again, nothing against Guillermo del Toro. I love his stuff, but the fact that this creative team is taking it in a different direction already does so much work, right? It just clears out all of your expectations, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm watching like a movie that's going to have like maybe a little bit more handheld camera, maybe a little bit more like practical effects, or effects that seem practical at least.
No, I'm digging it because it just looks, and I don't think the budget for this is very high. But there are certainly a lot of people out there that go, this just looks cheap. The only Hellboy that I recognize is Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy. And it's like, yeah, those are fine. And having lavish big productions are great, and having, over-the-top special effects. But Hellboy at its core is telling scary tales in the dark. And that's what the Crooked Man is. If people have read it, we talked about it here on the Major Spoilers podcast. It is a creepy, creepy tale. And to put it in the Appalachians, I think, is where this is set, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. I think so.
You mix that in and you just drop this Hellboy into the middle of that, and you make it feel like an independent horror film. Then I'm down for it, man. Yeah,
if this takes off, and also if like the budget wasn't ruinous, right?
Yeah.
If then yeah, like them just doing these like individual Hellboy tales, and maybe work their way up to like Conquer Worm, or like the big set pieces where it all comes together. That would be fine too. But yeah, in a lot of ways, that's what Hellboy is like these individual stories where like Hellboy goes to Romania, and Hellboy goes to Mexico, and Hellboy goes to Appalachia, and Hellboy goes to Russia, right? To sort of take care of these things, and they have their own because
look, they feel.
Yeah, and because Mike Mignola just freaking loves this stuff, right? They're thoroughly researched. In the comics, when he goes to Russia, Russia looks different from Appalachia, even though, presumably some places climate would be very similar, but it looks different. Like the people there look different.
Yeah,
He's researched the dress and everything. So like if they do that with Hellboy movies like this, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of people who are like, I've never even heard of this director before. It's got to be crap. Okay, listen. All it takes is 30 seconds to go on to IMDb and look up the director, Brian Taylor. And when you see his list of credits, you might even want to double down and say, I really want to go see this movie now, because he is the director behind the Crank franchise.
Sure.
Are you familiar with Crank with Jason Statham?
I am familiar with it. I'm also familiar with Happy, which he also
he
did.
directed he did 9 episodes of Happy. He also did Ghost Rider Spirits of Vengeance. So I when I look at his resume list, I'm like, yeah, these are all solid pieces. I mean, they're not, they're not Crank is by far not a Academy Award winning thing, but it's literally taking the action film and saying, what if we turn this up to 11? What if we cranked it up?
What if there was what if there was nothing else but like pure action?
Yeah. So I think he gets it. And so I'm really curious now what he's going to do with Hellboy the Crooked Man when it comes out later this year. I just cannot wait. What about you, dear listener? You can join the conversations about these stories and more over in our Discord server. You can join the Major Spoilers Discord server absolutely free. There's a link in the show notes, and we would love to see you join our growing community of awesome spoilerites. As I said, link in the show notes, cat gifts, and more waiting upon your arrival. Let us do some reviews. And Rodrigo, I guess I'm going to let you go first, even though thematically in our reviews section, these two are very much tied to one another. But I want you to go first.
Okay. So I'm reviewing the Suicide Squad Isekai show. As of now, I've seen 3 episodes. As of the recording, I've seen 3 episodes. I think the 4th episode is maybe out now, but I haven't had a chance to sit down and watch it.
Okay.
So first off, I just assumed that the Suicide Squad Isekai was going to be exclusively on Max, aka HBO Max. I guess FKA HBO Max. And so I was like, well, I don't have Max right now, so I'm not even going to think about this. And then I had a very intrusive YouTube ad come at me and be like, hey, dork, like there's anime on Hulu. And one of the things that it showed was the Suicide Squad Isekai. So I was like, what? So sure enough, I logged on to Hulu and there it was. And it is okay. It's I would say it's okay to pretty good. Interesting. Like here's the thing about it. So isekai is this idea of a character, usually from our world, ending up in some sort of different fantastical world, and the story tends to mostly take place in that world, right? So Inuyasha is a classic isekai. Fushigi Yugi is a classic isekai. Amphibia is a classic isekai. That's all good. That's all fine and good. And then the other side of this is like the Suicide Squad, right? So the idea is the Suicide Squad gets sent to this fantasy world to do something that Amanda Waller wants them to do. And then things go wrong from there. And generally, I was having trouble getting into it, honestly, for 2 reasons. Well, for one reason, which is that both halves of this, I feel like I've already seen.
Oh, I'm sure.
They are hewing very closely to like traditional isekai tropes.
Okay.
On one side, and on the other side, this is the Suicide Squad team that we've seen in the movies. So, it's Harley Quinn and Deadshot and Peacebringer is in this.
Peacemaker, yeah.
Peacemaker, yeah, that's it. So, I'm watching this and I'm like, they're introducing the characters and I'm like, I have seen this. It feels like I have seen this a lot recently, especially because both Suicide Squad movies kind of do it, right? It's like both like the second Suicide Squad movie doesn't assume that you've seen the first one necessarily.
Right,
so they do a lot of that work again. And then this is doing it again. And I'm like, there are so many characters that could be in this from DC. But now Suicide Squad is a thing, right? Like you can't do a Suicide Squad without a Harley Quinn anymore.
Right.
Just like, it used to be that Guardians of the Galaxy was a bunch of guys nobody heard of. Now there's a core group of Guardians of the Galaxy, and you couldn't do further Guardians of the Galaxy stuff without people being like, whoa, 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 where's Rocket Raccoon, right?
Right.
So it's kind of the same thing here. At around episode 3, I did start to get into it, because there is some clever stuff going on, and basically you find out that there have been previous excursions to this world, and there may be some recontextualized DC characters that have been in this world long enough to like take advantage of like the situation. So that's much more interesting. But it takes 3 episodes to get there, which is also a classic like kind of anime thing, and especially with Isekai, a lot of the time it takes a while to really get going into what the show wants to do. So, the art and animation is fantastic, like absolutely fantastic. The character designs are okay. I feel like they're very conservative. I feel like they could have gone a lot weirder or more interesting with them. But maybe the point is that they have to be normal because they're like all of the guys that we're following are from quote unquote our real Earth and not in this like magical world. So yeah, it didn't immediately hold my interest. It did as I was watching the openings, the opening animation and credits. There's a part that says Warner Brothers Japan, and assuming that Warner Brothers Japan is not like an American guy and 2 Japanese guys in a small office in Tokyo.
Yeah.
Which it could be.
It could be,
absolutely could be.
Yeah.
And they're just like the guys that are like, hello, animation studio. Yeah, we're wiring you the money now and have like no further involvement. The fact that if there is a significant presence of Warner Brothers in Japan and they can commission these things, I'm like, they should take this opportunity to do what they did with Suicide Squad, to give characters that people don't know an opportunity to sort of get reimagined, right? It's like imagine an anime where it lets it do its anime thing, starring like Blue Devil and like Deadman, or like characters like the same side characters that Suicide Squad is made of, except not the exact same voice, the same type of like sort of like B tier villain characters or hero characters, and then just give it to the Japanese and let them do their thing, because a lot of this Suicide Squad Isekai stuff really feels like Warner Brothers has its hands on it. Like they're just like, this is how these characters are supposed to do. This is how they come across. You can play with that a little bit, but not too much, right? So these interpretations of the characters don't feel novel. And like, I don't need Harley Quinn to behave in a completely different way. But I like the Harley Quinn that is in this show is the like, I don't know, like Arkham Harley Quinn.
Oh, right.
Right. Where it's like the Arkham Harley Quinn was a reinterpretation of the Bruce Timm Harley Quinn, right? It like moved her in a different direction, made her a little bit like more aggressive and a little bit different. But this version of Harley Quinn doesn't feel like it's doing anything new, and neither do any of the versions of the other characters that we've seen so far. So it's not bad. I'm not like, I don't want to bash it too much, but I like weirdly, I don't feel like it's doing anything new. It's just take 2 tastes that taste great together, I guess. But the 2 tastes are like, hamburger and ketchup. It's like, yeah. But this is not doing anything new.
Yeah.
So 3.5 slices of meatloaf, not bad.
Okay.
But maybe wait until the whole thing's out to like sit down and binge it.
Have you seen Batman Ninja, the movie?
I think so. Yeah.
It's where Batman gets transported to like feudal Japan and he has to fight all of his, Joker, Catwoman. In feudal Japan, and it goes completely bonkers stuff.
Yeah. So stuff like that is interesting. It just like there's so many ways that you can reinterpret something, right? And like that's the thing that feels like such a lost opportunity with this, is that these characters aren't really being reinterpreted, with like the slight the slight, like, a spoiler alert, Clayface is in this, and he is closer to the Harley Quinn Adventures Clayface than other
Oh,
Clayfaces.
okay.
So that's interesting because this show is also a little bit more serious. So it's interesting to see a slightly more serious, but still like this guy's like a petulant actor kind of thing. So that is fun. There's
Mhm.
lots of little fun things in this. But when
Alright.
you look at the package altogether, I'm like, how many more episodes of this do I have to watch? One more. There's 3 of them. Okay, let's just put it on.
Okay. All right. Very cool. Very cool. So I had kind of a weird revelation or experience that happened this week. I'm watching this other show. I think it's on Netflix, where people are getting superpowers and they don't know what's causing it. It feels very much like a Heroes TV series out of England.
Yeah.
But there's one scene in the show, and I don't remember what episode it is, 3 or 4, where one of the girls who's trying to get her superpower to kick in, and she's trying to figure out what it's all about and how to use it. She's with a guy, and the guy is revealed to also have powers, and he is about to attack her and, take her out. And it's just so sudden and such a surprise when this reveal happens that my initial reaction was like, oh no, look out, girl. Right. But then my other reaction was like, that's kind of terrifying in how they pulled it off. And then I realized, oh, wait a minute. I get why the X-Men work. Because if you, Rodrigo, or me, or whoever else, our dear listeners, if we suddenly woke up one day and there were a bunch of people who had superpowers and we had none, we would probably have a freak out. And and there would be a large uprising of people who are anti-mutant, in the case of the X-Men, or people who want to take down these superheroes because they represent a threat to humans, to our egos or whatever. So that one moment just triggered me a moment to say, oh, that's scary. And then I was like, oh no, this is why anti-mutant rhetoric is so big, because of people in the Marvel universe, or not really in the DC universe that much, get freaked out by people whose powers they don't understand. In the DC universe, when Amanda Waller was originally introduced, she wanted to use superpowered beings to make America great again via the power of jingoism, right? She came out in the 80s. Sure. She's very much influenced by this idea that we must spread democracy across the world. And I'm going to do it any way necessary, including taking these villains and planting bombs in their heads and making them do what I want, because it's for the good of humanity. But over time, Amanda Waller has really, really changed. She now seems like she wants to impose her will, not the government's will, but specifically her will on the rest of the world, because she doesn't trust vigilantes. She doesn't trust a Batman or a Superman or a Green Lantern, because she doesn't know where their allegiances lie. She doesn't know if they're with America or not. She knows who they are, but she can't control them like she does her squad, her team.
Her little checkmate team.
Yeah, checkmate brings it in as well. And so when we get to Absolute Power number 1 out this week from Mark Waid and Dan Mora, Waller has gone full, I don't care about anyone else but what my will is, and she's trying to impose her will on the rest of the world. And so she's teamed up with the BRAINIAC Queen. She's teamed up with FAILSAFE, which was the Batman robot that was created in case Batman was ever put out of commission. She's got her own Suicide Squad, Task Force X. She's also created a team of Amazos, and she has gone and set out to take out the vigilante heroes once and for all, because ultimately her idea is, kind of that phrase, you're either with us or against us kind of thing, right? Yeah. So, she has gone so far that in this issue, she's enacting her plan, and she's even lured Green Arrow onto her side. Asterisk, maybe. And Green Arrow makes a good argument in this book. he basically is taking ideas that Green Arrow had back in the 60s saying, yeah, you guys are good, because he's communicating with them when Batman is like, Green Arrow, are you there? He's like, yeah, no, I'm not with you guys anymore. And he's basically like, look, I gave you guys a chance. I've been warning you for years that you're good at, stopping volcanoes, and you're good about keeping alien invaders from space. But I've told you for years, you need to be focusing on homelessness and hunger and social injustices. And you guys haven't done any of that. And Waller is wanting to make the world safe for people. So I'm going to switch to her side. Goodbye. And I found that very interesting. Let's be honest. I think Green Arrow has his own little ploy going on where he's the mole on the inside, because Batman and Green Arrow always have a plan for everything. But one of the shocking bits in this issue is that because Waller has these Amazos and Brainiac Queens and FAILSAFE on her side, she's flooded the world with AI-generated videos of superheroes committing acts of terror and aggression on the public, and is actually turning the public against the heroes, kind of like, I don't know if you remember, Rodrigo, but back in the 80s, there was a series called Legends, and Glorious Godfrey kind of used evangelicalism and television and news, the mass media there, to convince the populace, the public, that heroes were bad and you should turn against them. And so this kind of feels like an updated tale of today. And I don't know if it was the intent or not. I'm sure it was, because Mark Waid is a very good writer. He uses this use of deepfakes, of AI-generated images, of, this fake news as kind of a villain of social media. And I think he's making this commentary, more or less, whether he intended to or not, saying, hey, you need to be careful. We as a public need to be careful about what we're seeing on the social medias, what we're seeing on TV, what we're seeing on the internet, because all of that could be made up just to advance somebody's agenda. And in this case, the agenda is Amanda Waller, because she is stoking those fears using the same principles. And again, not comparing Amanda Waller to a Nazi. I'm not comparing Mark Waid or DC Comics to Nazism or anything. But the principles of Joseph Goebbels and how you manipulate your audience have been studied since the 1940s and have been implemented since the 1940s across mass media, advertising, etc., to get people to agree to buy something or to do something or whatever it is. And I think that in this case, Waid seems to understand the power of the media to shape the public's mind. And so I would think we as a people, and hopefully the people in the DC universe, would understand that when we don't study history, we're doomed to repeat it. You know that phrase? Because I feel like if we were in the DC universe and all of a sudden we saw Shazam attacking a bunch of people, or we saw Superman and Supergirl, leveling a city, and we saw that on the news, I would hope that we would stop for a moment and go, well, that doesn't make sense based on everything that I know about Superman or Supergirl or, whoever, Wonder Woman. But I think just like today, when we see something that is questionable online, we don't instantly say, is this for real? I think too many of us look at these kinds of things and we say, oh no, this is absolutely real. We need to turn against this person or these people or whoever it may be.
Yeah.
And so I think, at least in this first issue, that's how it's all set up. Waller uses the media to manipulate the public to turn against the superheroes so she can step in at the last couple of pages and say, America, I know that you're having a problem and I'm here to help, as part of her, whatever her organization is that she's a part of. And I know that Waid is a good enough writer that there's always an out to how this is going to end. Green Arrow will probably be it. The character Dreamer is in here, or maybe even FAILSAFE, because the FAILSAFE robot, even though it's been reprogrammed, does kind of question some of Waller's motives and tactics that she's using as she is taking down the superheroes. And she is taking down the superheroes. Like, Superman gets shot, and it's not with a kryptonite bullet. It's with a regular bullet. She's able to take away or nullify his powers. But at the end of this issue, Dan Mora's art is great, and Mark Waid's writing, creates a really chilling setup for this summer event. I'm only going to give this like 4 slices of meatloaf. I probably would have given it a higher score, but like the lessons of history, that if we don't study them, we're doomed to repeat them. we've kind of seen this story before. Now, granted, it's taking place now with social media, but whether it's Legends or Checkmate or Task Force X or Suicide Squad movies or the Peacemaker TV series, we're kind of in an infinite crisis loop here with this kind of storytelling, especially with Amanda Waller. And I trust that Mark Waid's going to deliver a satisfying ending. I just really hope it doesn't end with Waller getting the Maxwell Lord treatment. So 4 slices of meatloaf out of 5 for Absolute Power #1 out this week from DC Comics. I really thought about this in light of having had this realization of how the public would react to real mutants, to real superheroes, but then also seeing, the way that the media has been manipulating this campaign cycle, and just looking at the insanity of stuff that's going on social media. I can really see from a public's perspective inside that DC universe, Rodrigo, I can see how people would say, oh no, Superman's a bad guy. We need Amanda Waller and her Ministry of Justice or whatever it is to come in and save us regardless of what happens. Even if that means we have to give up our freedoms so that we can be protected from this boogeyman Batman in Gotham City. I'm willing to give up that stuff to let that happen.
It's interesting because part of what's interesting about Amanda Waller is that she does represent the U.S. government.
So, originally she did.
Having her, So here's the problem. You mentioned Max Lord, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There are several non-superpowers having villains in the DC universe, and they're all very smart, have a lot of resources, et cetera, et cetera. Especially if you count someone like Ra's al Ghul, who doesn't have any zap you with his face powers, but he's immortal. It's accrued a lot of wealth. What's the caveman guy? Vandal Savage.
Yeah, Vandal Savage. Mm-hmm.
Right. There's a lot of rich or powerful connected guys. So they exist in actually these very narrow wedges. And if you had told me about this, but had beeped out Amanda Waller's name every time, and also the pronouns, I would have assumed you were talking about Lex Luthor.
Yeah. Because again, we've seen Lex Luthor. Yeah, we've seen Lex Luthor do this thing too. We've seen him as president try to outlaw superheroes as vigilantes and as bad guys.
So having her step out into this outright very, very villainous plays, it's really too bad because comics and stories with Amanda Waller have this edge that you can have somebody come in and say, well, we're going to do this with superheroes because the government wants this or this, right? Or in the JLU stories where Amanda Waller shows up and what's his name, Captain Atom, literally he's standing with the Justice League, walks over and turns around, and now he's standing with Waller because he's an active
military
member of the Air Force or whatever. Yeah. So it's that made those interactions interesting, and it made them insidious. And it brings this really zesty anti-government flavor to a lot of these comics, and it gets you thinking about that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, and that's why the Green Arrow turn in this issue is such a surprise. Although technically between Absolute Power Ground Zero, which came out last week, and Absolute Zero #1 today, there is a Green Arrow issue where I believe it's a tie-in to this, where I believe they're converting him over to their side. But still, if you're just reading this as the thing, here's this guy that has been anti-establishment, anti-big government, and now he's working for them, or at least working for Waller.
Yeah, it's if it's doing it straight, maybe it's a good representation of the skeptic to alt-right pipeline, which is a legit thing that exists.
Yeah, or people who are literally aligning themselves with the bad guy because they think that the bad guy will help them in the end, only to realize that, oh no, I didn't realize the tiger was going to eat me.
Right.
Yeah, it's
we'll see.
It's an interesting story. I mean, certainly Mark Waid is no fan of certain administrations, and certainly you can tell that he is putting a lot of current, or maybe it's just me reading in current political climate and things that are going on in the world into comics. But I think, as we were talking about in the Major Spoilers podcast pre-show, Rodrigo, that art can be a reflection of life around us and the things that are impacting us and the things that are on our mind. And so I think to go into this and say, well, nothing that is going on around us for the last 5 years are at all reflected into this comic book would also be putting my head in the sand and not realizing that the sky is falling kind of thing. So it was interesting. It's been a while since I've read, DC Cape and Tights type books. And so to jump into this with the last couple of years kind of being up and down and back and forth, but to see, I think the thing that is somewhat, and this is why I think Mark Waid is a good writer, and I'm sure that and I'm going to wait till the end before I say this was a good series or a bad series. Mark Waid is a good writer, so I trust that he knows what he's doing, and Mark Waid is also, based on his past actions, my previous interactions with him, and things that he said specifically that led to the World's Finest series. He is someone that can stick a landing, and he can do it in such a way that makes everything satisfying. That being said, I have not liked the way that Amanda Waller has evolved over the last 40 years, where she's gone from somebody that is definitely America first, America best, the jingoism attitude of let's spread democracy across the world, even if it means we have to do some bad things and align ourselves with bad guys, to I'm tired of these effing superheroes and I'm going to do everything I can to take them out because I can't control them, is really a drastic change over that time period, in my opinion. Other people may not disagree. I think certainly seeing Amanda Waller show up for the first time in the Justice League TV series really set the tone for how we look at Amanda Waller since then.
Yeah, maybe that's the thing is like anything that DC that Justice League show touched just got such a glow up, right? It it kind of like gave a burst to Booster Gold.
Mm-hmm.
It gave a burst to like a lot like Black Manta
Mm-hmm.
of all things,
Yeah.
right? And especially Amanda Waller. It made Amanda Waller a very cool villain.
Yeah.
And so she's been written a lot more. And the more you write someone, the more they like mutate into something else.
Yeah. So I am very interested to see how this turns out. Again, I'm giving it, some people would say four slices is a very high rating. I would have liked to have given it higher, but I'm just, this is chilling and it's creepy. And it is a reflection of what I see is going on right now throughout the world. And, yeah, there's some things that I don't like. There's certainly things that I like, but it's certainly a comic that makes me stop and think and really start to think about, okay, why are they doing this? What's the story that they're telling? Why are these things right here? Why do we have a Brainiac Queen? Why do we have a Mazos? Why do we have FAILSAFE? All these automated robots. Why are they part of this story? So yeah, I haven't seen anybody be completely dismissive of this series yet. I think somebody over at Marvel posted something on Twitter today saying, hey, I'm not going to do a review of this, but please consider what's been going on with Amanda Waller as a character. Yeah, this is different. But I guess at the end of the day, I've got here in my notes, Rodrigo, Bare Naked Ladies. And I hope you were, I don't know if you were sitting there thinking, God, are there Bare Naked Ladies in this Absolute Power issue? No, I'm talking about the band Bare Naked Ladies. And more specifically, their song, It's All Been Done Before. Because literally Maxwell Lord tried to eliminate the superheroes with the Omax and the Brother Eye.
Yeah.
And the only way that story ended was with Wonder Woman snapping his neck.
Right.
And so that's why I'm afraid. Yeah. That's why I'm afraid they're going to do the exact same thing, but only this time it's going to be Green Arrow killing Waller or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing is like, if you show up to read DC Comics, it's because you know these characters in some way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most likely. Mm-hmm. So you do want familiar stuff. But yeah, when the story itself is coming across really familiar, then that is worrisome because it's like, well, is it just going to be the same thing? Or, are they going to try to do the same thing with stakes that are so high that they get like ridiculously and kind of unbelievably high, even for superheroes? So I understand the concern.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to check out Absolute Power #1, there's a link where you can pick up a copy. It's an Amazon affiliate link, so we get, like maybe 5 cents back from your purchase. It's not a lot, but a lot of you go out and buy it. Maybe we can buy a comic book next week and talk about it on the show. Thank you to everyone who supports the show and all the shows in the Major Spoilers Podcast Network. This week, we're sending our thanks out to Jaime Tiampo. I believe that's how you pronounce the last name. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. Jaime signed up to become one of our regular patrons, and we thank Jaime for your support. And you could do the same thing. You can join us at patreon.com/major spoilers. Now, I've talked about this before. When you sign up at the silver level, you get access, Rodrigo, up to 4 bonus episodes each month, including the Major Spoilers Podcast pre-show, where Rodrigo and I this week talked about, gosh, it went all sorts of places. Fandom, art, critiques. How should people behave when they get a little bit of fame? You can't find that anywhere else except at the patreon.com/major spoilers. Now, I'm not saying that becoming a patron at patreon.com/major spoilers is going to change your life, but here's what some of our patrons have said after signing up for the Patreon. I got a big bonus at work. I listened to Critical Hit a week early. It cured my depression and I lost 50 pounds. Another person says food tastes better. Another person said, well, after becoming a Major Spoilers patron, my old guy face skin cleared up. I lost over 30 pounds with another 30 to go. I traveled to another country since being in the military. It was actually fun going to another country without the government telling me where I had to go. And the number one best thing that's happened, I get to listen to new episodes of Top 5 Major Spoilers and Critical Hit. Now, I'm not saying that these things are going to happen to you. In fact, Rodrigo, I can't even verify these claims.
Sure.
But why would our patrons lie?
Yeah, they have no reason to lie.
They have no reason to lie. So if you want your life to be a little bit better, just like our patrons, all you need to do is head to patreon.com/major spoilers. Got a big bonus at work. Man, that's a great one right there, Rodrigo.
Yeah, that'd be nice. I need to start listening to Major Spoilers.
You need to become a patron.
I need to become a patron.
Oh, man. Yeah, I was told that my raise this year won't even meet the rate of inflation. So, yeah. All right, Rodrigo, we are now going to talk about Don't Spit in the Wind from Mad Cave Studios. This is something that you recommended. It's a 4-issue miniseries that released in trade last October of 2023. And it is basically about the end of the world. You want to tell us a little bit about this and why you recommended it? Because I got to tell you, after reading both Absolute Power and this one, I'm pretty depressed
now.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Don't Spit in the Wind is a story about trash collectors, except it takes place in the far future where the Earth has basically been completely destroyed with trash and nuclear waste and just garbage. Humanity has gone to a space station that it floats above the Earth. And we're sort of following the people that are down on Earth very, very slowly trying to clean it up, or at least contain some of the mess. And then a giant mutant goldfish shows up, and everybody dies.
This is so. Look, if you were to ask me to give you the elevator pitch on this, it's like, what if Wall-E met Mad Max?
Sure, yeah.
That's how I would describe this series, because yes, there are garbage collectors that are trying to clean up the planet, just like you find in Wall-E, but just like in Mad Max, probably Thunderdome, the world is insane. And while there are two lovers who are just trying to make enough money so that they can get a middle income house on the floating space station, corporate greed, ignorance, the Earth striking back, I guess. Cults, super cults are all bringing that to make it an impossibility. Literally, while they say that the planet is inhospitable to Earthlings, there are still people running around that are part of some nuclear cult that just want to destroy everything. And their mission is to accept the garbage for what it is. And they're going around and killing all the trash collector people. And so that's horrifying. I think there's two different cults. When I was reading this, it was hard to because the art is very stylized. And so at times it was hard to tell whether, okay, is this the nuclear cult or is this the cannibal cult? You know, which group of, which cult is this? Or if there's only one cult, they're all pretty crazy.
There's only one cult, I think. And it's the same one. The nuclear guys are also the ones that are like embrace the plastic god.
Yeah. Okay. And then at the same time, there's like this horror story going on where they go into this nuclear reactor and they, as you said, find this giant radioactive goldfish that is like, I don't know, the size of a lake. Yeah. That's coming out and it's ripped off someone's head and it's speaking to everybody through this ripped off head on the end of a tentacle.
Yeah.
And then up in space, you've got the president of the space station who's just gorging himself as corporate fat cats will. And his assistant is like, hey, listen, there's riots at the lowest level. We're running out of food. We have too much trash. The space station is falling from the sky and we need to do something. And if we don't do something, everybody's going to die. And sure enough, by the end of the arc, everybody's dead.
Yep.
Why'd you pick this?
Mostly the art.
Okay.
I think it's pretty unusual. You don't see a lot of stuff like this. I feel like back in the 80s, like late 70s and 80s, you saw a lot more stuff like this, either in like your kind of like Vertigo-y type stuff, or a lot more indie stuff that looked like this. And since then, I feel like there's been a real drive to look more and more sort of corporate-y, like a lot more, clean with like fancy coloring and stuff like that. It like that kind of like denotes a professionalism or whatever, and like a lot of indies pursue that. So it was interesting to see this like very unapologetically stylized kind of gross art.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Gross art, I guess.
Yeah.
Part of me, when I look at it, go, okay, I can kind of get a Mobius feel from this, but kind of crossed with like Tank Girl art.
Yeah.
And where it's very like this one guy is walking around in a suit that is like 20 feet tall. And another guy is walking around in a suit that is, regular human sized, and they've painted graffiti on it. And they've got all this both religious and non-religious iconography all over their suits. And so part of me is like, oh, that's very Mobius. But then you look at the scratchy detail that's on everything and how everything is not in proportion. Like the woman that our hero is in love with, she's not really kind of drawn in my view, a correct proportions. Right. And same way with a lot of other people. And so that makes it feel very off in that sense.
Yeah. Characters have like, because they're in these suits, they have like enormous hands. And if you look at the suit where their arms is and where their head is in the suit, you might be like, wait a minute, does this person just like have like a really long neck or no neck or like really long arms? And it's like, no, it's just stylized.
Yeah.
It is weird, and that is like something that I felt was a little bit off. Like, this art is generally off-putting, but within that, I did find it weirdly off-putting that there's a lady in this, and she's the only one who doesn't wear a huge carapace. In fact, she wears like a big helmet and big gloves, but she wears like a skin-tight like shirt the whole time.
Yeah.
And like she's a driver, she's like a pilot, and I'm like, okay, it's because she's a pilot. If she's ever on the planet, she's gonna put the big suit on, but she doesn't. She ends up on the floor as well and doesn't change. So
there's another guy. I forget what his name is. Dave, I think is his name, her co-pilot. And he's like, he wears the giant metal suit, but then he's got a Hawaiian shirt over the top of that.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
Yeah, that's something that this does really well, is that you can look at it and like at first it's like tough to tell who everyone is. But then you realize that actually each of these Earth-based garbage people have, and by that I mean people who clean garbage, not that they are garbage, have thoroughly, not only are their suits like visually different, but they've decorated them themselves. So for example, there's a guy who is praying to the Virgin of Guadalupe, and one of the shoulder pads of his armor has like a big Virgin of Guadalupe drawn on it.
Yep.
Which is not present in anybody else's. Their backpacks are different and stuff. So there's a lot of like, it's interesting because it's a 4-issue series and everybody's dead by the end. So I'm like, a lot of these characters we don't get a lot of time with. And yet there's been a lot of design work that went into how their suits look, how the characters look, etc.
Yeah. So we haven't mentioned his name. Stefano Cardicelli is the writer artist of this series. And even though the art borders into that creepy, grotesque area, it is still something that I really did enjoy quite a bit. I did like the little details that are here and there, like you're saying about the art that's on everybody's costumes, the fact that he's paying attention to user interfaces, like things that are popping up on screens. Just the designs of the ship are really cool. The way that he explores, I guess I'm going to say he explores exhaust coming out of the back of the ships and everything. Just the miles and miles of garbage everywhere is really cool. I said this story depressed me because at the end everybody dies, including the god, the fish god that rises and says, "You will all bow before me," and then huge nuclear explosion when the 2.1 billion people die in the space station crashing.
Yeah.
But I was also a little frustrated with this book because it was hard to tell which direction they wanted to go, because at one part you're like, ooh, this is going to be a really cool horror monster story about look what we've done with our nuclear waste and how it's mutated the life on Earth. And then it is no, this is a story about corporate greed. And oh no, this is a story about, religious zealots gone amok. And oh no, this is a end of the world kind of thing. And so at times I felt like I was being pulled in multiple directions at once, trying to figure out what, granted, I think the theme is everything is bad. This is what's going to happen if we don't do something about it. I get that as an overall message, but I kind of needed something to be a little bit more cohesive. And it's just really a downer of a book that is just like, no matter what we do, whether it's a monster or corporate greed or pollution, global warming or, whatever, we're screwed no matter what.
Yeah. And it's really, once I read through it, I was like, okay, so this book is like the last 10 seconds of humanity. Like everything has already happened. Like anything these characters do is completely futile at this point. Like the heroes can't rise above it. The space station was probably going to crash anyway. Under its current leadership or whatever, it's already too late. So reading it like that, I'm like, okay, well then the fact that like this fish monster appears and is hanging out, it doesn't feel as random. But you could also see it as like, here's this author who has some cool ideas for a series, and he, for whatever reason, whether it's like because it's very difficult or because the producers, like the studio was like, hey, this needs to be like, we can pay you for 4 issues, or because they only wanted to do 4 issues or whatever, like something outside of like that creativity is pushing against it. And they're like, okay, well, I'll just have it all. I'll still get to do my cool designs on my cool monster and my cool space station, and everything looks really cool. And then it all just ends in a blaze of glory, and I got to do my project, right? So I think there's like I don't want to say charitable, but like a positive extrapolation of it, where you're like, okay, so this is making a statement about this, and there's like a less charitable look and being like, this comic was rushed. Like clearly,
I don't feel it was that way.
Space to breathe.
Yeah, I do wish it could breathe, but at the same time, and this was my final takeaway from this, and I'm glad that you said it, is this is the final 10 seconds of humanity. Because one of the very first things that they point out at the beginning of this book is that life on planet Earth is still going on. Yeah. Like there's birds running around, this giant fish god thing arises. And I think that's part of this whole, the fact that we as humans and our egos and everything, we think that we are destined to live forever. And if humanity is wiped out, well, then the Earth is wiped out as well. And it's like, no, the Earth, and unless we crack the Earth in two from some kind of a nuclear exchange or something, the Earth is still going to go on. And as we've seen in your favorite television show from the whatever year it was, the 80s, the dinosaur show, they all got wiped out as well, yet life still went on. And so part of me is like, yes, even though all of humanity is dead, I think that Earth is going to turn into something new at the end of that. So I did get a little bit of hope from that, going, good, humanity's gone. Let's let the next group come in. But at the same time, I was just like, oh yeah, humanity's gone. And that makes me feel bad. I wish there was something I could do about it.
It's like when you don't pop the bubbles in that, remember that virus game?
Oh yes.
You're like where you're playing the virus.
Yeah. I hated that.
Even you won't pop the bubbles because that helps the virus.
Yeah. And the creator of that game contacted me about that too. So he was like, no, that's kind of the point. I'm like, good.
That's good.
So yeah, this was a very different book. And considering the things that we've read and talked about this week, it seems all very downer. It seems like if you read everything that we read and watched everything that we watched, you might come away with the same kind of attitude. But I see that there's hope at the end of all of this, even this story where, even though life seems to have been wiped out, I know it's going to continue. Even though, it looks like absolute power is setting up for like the darkest of the dark times in DC Comics. I know that's not what's going to happen. Same way with the Suicide Squad anime that you're watching is, it's gonna have a resolution that is going to be satisfying. Up. Yeah. So, and even, spoiler alert for the Crooked Man, there's a sequel. I mean, I'm sure there's a sequel in the works because they're not going to be able to tell the whole Crooked Man story in one movie. So there's that. So there's hope. There's hope, Rodrigo. What's your final thoughts? What's your final thoughts on this book?
I like it a lot. Even if you read the story as an absolute downer, which is easy to do. Again, I like the idea that this is like dirty Mobius kind of stuff. I like the art a lot. It's like it's busy and it's scratchy and it's like people have weird proportions on purpose, and it's something that you don't see a lot of this in like a fully produced comic anymore. Like it is hard to find a comic that's putting out art like this, and I think that's worthwhile just by itself.
I didn't care for this book from the story perspective, as I've already mentioned. But I agree with you that I think the art is very good. And depending on how you approach this story, it can be a very good story. I mean, it is a good story. It's a love story that is never meant to be, right? It just is like, no matter what happens, these two people are never meant to be. She's in the sky. He's on the ground. He's in a suit. She's running around with a tank top on. It's that kind of thing. So if you're in the mood to read into the world stuff, if you're in the nihilistic mood that nothing matters, then dive into this and embrace every downer part of this book. But at the same time, if you want to see really good art and if you want to see a story that can make you think, and maybe will make you think about throwing that plastic bottle in just the regular trash that's going to wind up in the ocean or in microplastics or whatever, if it also makes you think a little bit about changing your life to make future generations be able to get together, in this case, Travis and what's the woman's name? Cassandra or something? I forget what her name is.
I forgot.
That maybe if they could get together by you just doing one little thing now, that's also a little hopeful there. So I'm not saying rush right out and buy it, but if you do get a chance to pick it up, it's 4 issues, so it's not like a big deal. $18 or whatever to pick it up. It's, again, not that big of a deal. It is worth checking out. So there you go. Thank you for that, Rodrigo, for bringing that to our attention. I remember when you first read the first issue on the podcast, that it sounded like it was going to be interesting. So there you go. It certainly was interesting.
Yeah, it's a weird book.
Yeah. That wraps it up for this issue. Thank you so much for listening. Again, if you found value in this show, we would love for you to join us on our Patreon, where you can find even more fun, including the Major Spoilers podcast pre-show. You can't find it anywhere else. You can also unlock a bunch of other things. Or this month in the Discord, we have a Reading Corner channel. And this month, in the month of June, we as a group read Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, which is now an Apple TV series that just concluded. And we talked about the book, Dr. Bradley Will and I did, on the Major Spoilers Book Club. You don't have to be a patron to download and listen to this episode. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/majorspoilers. You can listen to that discussion. It's about 40 minute discussion of books, specifically this book. And you can do that absolutely for free. We're giving that away for you. And we'll probably continue to do that, but it will only be exclusive onto the Major Spoilers podcast Patreon page. Again, patreon.com/majorspoilers. So we hope you go and check that out and maybe then decide to become a patron. Next week on the show, it's all about the Supreme Court and decisions that the Supreme Court made. Why? Because we know that you love history and we do too. And we will talk with you soon.
If I had the X-ray vision of a Superman, I could save a few bucks and stand around and read through the covers of the comics on the stand. But although every other page would be backwards, I suppose I could still read the evens and the odds. Well, I don't know. Guess I haven't thought this all the way through. Plus, as soon as the comic book store guy knew, they kicked my butt out on the corner. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Think about a better way. If I was hulking green or gray, I could just bust through that brick wall, take their comic books away. But then the little meat would deal with all the tanks and bombs and guns. Have you ever tried to read a series with all that going on? Guess I need to rethink this plan. How would I bag and board my comics with such huge hands? Guess I already told ya. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. If I'm Stark Raven, rich like a man of iron, I might not be surprised to find that I might actually have the hard cold to follow an entire storyline. But would I really even need to read up on all those escapades? I mean, who needs such distractions when your sister's such a babe? But the downside is such a beast. Being shot up in a fun bee in the Middle East with a gang sign throwing soldier. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What a major spoiler. Whoa, 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 whoa. What a major spoiler.
This podcast is copyright 2024 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.